Go though to my panel, the wonderful John Roscombe from the Institute of Public Affairs and Nick Cater from the Menzies Research Centre. Over the weekend, Nick Cater, Bari Weiss, an American journalist, you know her well, former editor, wrote that we are all Jews now because free societies must stand together. And I think she's absolutely right. She made the point too further on in her article, and of course it was a transcript basically of a speech she gave in the States, but that in societies where Jews prosper and are safe, it's a real sign of health of a country's culture. And where this doesn't happen or where it declines, it's the real cultural canary in the coal mine. And I think that's incredibly, incredibly true.
I think that became really apparent on October the 7th, didn't it, Peter? You know, on the one side you have a country that all their values are based on the great Western civilization, on the Judeo-Christian tradition and everything that flows from that, the country that builds things, that doesn't destroy things, a country that treats all its citizens with respect and doesn't put kids in the firing line, for instance. So you've got that versus Hamas. And I think it became very clear to me, and I think a lot of people, that this is a civilizational moment. And because what is really, really troubling is not the barbarians at the gates, as it were. It's the barbarians within. It's the people in Western societies who seem unable to recognise the boundaries here, unable to recognise the virtues of Western civilization, and just treat this as some sort of, he said, one side versus the other side, oppressors versus oppressed. That's not what this is about. And I think the disappointment and the troubling thing is that so many people in the West seem so blind to this.
So true, Nick. The billionaire Australian health magnate, the late Paul Ramsey, he left his fortune, didn't have an immediate family. He left his fortune to a centre, the Centre to Defend Western Civilisation. I know when he did that a few years back, people thought, well, that's crazy. Western civilisation has stood against the barbarians. It'll be here forever. But I think the events of recent weeks and months show us that if you don't protect it, you won't have it. I think that's the call to arms for all of us. I'll just bring you in, if I can, John. Sydney Theatre Company, they have apologised because they had a group of actors in a play, The Seagull was the play, who put Palestinian headscarves on and, I'm assuming, just ran their normal lines, but did it as a silent protest. And one of the board members of the STC, Judy Houseman, she has quit over this protest, but I think this will be the first of many.
Well, it might well be, Peter, and what happened at the STC would have been deeply hurtful and offensive. But we have to remember the STC, Sydney Theatre Company, has form. I can understand Judy Houseman resigning from the foundation board of the STC, but it seems she and others are very willing to sit on that board with Tim Minchin. Now, Tim Minchin, a so-called comedian, a so-called actor, has made a career out of being deeply hurtful and deeply offensive about Catholics. So I think what we're seeing is a little bit of picking and choosing when people are going to be offended. And the STC has licensed bigotry, it's licensed offensiveness, and these are now the outcomes that we are witnessing.
We have got the cop circus coming up, Nick Cater. I know you watch it as closely as I do. It's like poking your eye out with a sharp stick. But if we want to talk about energy and where this world's headed, we've all got to engage with it come sort of November, December every year. I saw, interestingly, that President Biden, he is not going. I understand the King Charles, is going. Previously had been told by the then Prime Minister Liz Truss, I think it was, don't go, or he's going this time, we're told. And we've also got our guy, Chris Bowen, attending. What can we expect, do you think?
Well, I think it's all predictable, isn't it? We'll have another IPCC shock announcement that the planet's warming quickly and we've all got to get together and pass even more rigorous measures. It worries me what they're going to do, having achieved, got the whole world to this zero 2050 goal, which, as far as I can see, is completely impossible. But anyway, they're all signed up for that. What next? Because every year, of course, they have to up the virtue signalling a lot. Interestingly, though, Peter, I think this time there'll be a lot of people talking about nuclear, from what I've read, and Chris Bowen won't be in those conversations, so that's troubling.
Well, John, square this circle for me if you can. The Albanese government's talking about banning disposable vapes. I think that's going to come in from January. But at the same time, you've got the ACT government allowing anybody to walk around with heroin or ice or methamphetamine in their pocket. There's now allowable carrying limits and allowable amounts for use. At the same time in Victoria too, on the Premier's desk, been there for 1,200 days, including obviously her former predecessor, Daniel Andrews' desk as well, a report into a second injecting room in Melbourne. Now, you can walk in and shoot heroin in that injecting room, but you won't be able to vape and you won't be able to smoke. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Yes, it can't be explained, Peter. And to everyday Australians, they see the Greens pushing for exactly, as you've said, the legalisation basically of hard drugs, while at the same time measures that do get people off smoking and that do provide pleasure for many, many Australians, they seem to be absolutely against. It's a double standard, it's hypocritical, and it can't be explained. And one of the things that always bemuses me is that so few people ask the Greens, ask Adam Bandt to explain this double standard and to ask that of the Albanese government as well.
Just quickly, Nikita, I mean, we're drowning in debt right around the country, but in Victoria it's particularly bad. State debt's going to hit $256 billion by June 2027. I remember in the Howard government years, we used to have this man to pay back Labor's debt. At that time, it was $96 billion. Well, that's a nation's debt. This is a state debt of nearly $260 billion. And he noted that the debt's historically high. He said he can't see any plan to pay it off, and that they're also going to have to borrow even more money from offshore for all of its significant infrastructure. We're going out the back door, aren't we, at a state level at least?
We are. I mean, state debt is rising across the country, as we know, but what's most worrying about Victoria is, A, it's by far the largest debt per capita, and secondly, there's no plan to pay it off. You know, they don't have in their forward estimates to sort of pay down the debt plan, whereas in New South Wales and Queensland, at least it's there. This is really troubling. I mean, Victoria is not a state with lots of resources, so they can't get the royalties that, say, Queensland and Western Australia gets. There is no way.
Hang on, we do have them. We're just not allowed to use them. We do have them.
That's right. But they're going to have to just. I mean, the only way to pay down this debt, of course, is to stop spending and to make the economy more productive. And there's no signs of doing that. So Victoria, in particular, really worries me. But I think across the country, state debt is becoming a significant part of our overall national debt, and we have to do something about that.
All right, Nick Cato, John Roscombe, thank you both for your time. See you next week.